So today I am going to do candied jalapenos. Thank you to Patreon viewers who have supported the podcast and allowed me to do a third episode each month. And so I'm going to go ahead and do some canning stuff. Today I'm going to do candied jalapenos, and I think for September's extra episode I will do apple butter because it's apple season, y'all. But in the meantime, we get sucked into U-Pick, which is why we end up having to figure out what to do with 7 pounds of jalapenos. But one year we did do that, and I was very excited that I tried this recipe, and I really enjoyed it. What do you do with candied jalapenos? Well, you can do lots of stuff with them. What I tend to do is use them, of course, as like a condiments for tacos, or any sort of like burrito, any sort of things like that. They're also really excellent on nachos, and secretly really excellent on pizza. They just add a little bit of heat and just a little bit of sweet to contrast with the other salty stuff that's hanging out around it. So they're great for that. There you go. I am going to can these. They do not need a pressure canner. They are acidic enough that they can just be hot water bath canned. So you just need a hot water bath canner. I'll put mine in here. Okay, so here is my hot water bath canner. You don't need a special pan at all to do a hot water bath. You can do it in any pan as long as it covers the jars you're going to can. With at least, I think the standard is 2 inches of water above it. So with like the little half pints, like you can totally can them in a regular like stock pot that you have on hand. Just make sure it's tall enough. A lot of the shorter like 5-quart ones are a little bit too stubby to take the full height of these plus the extra water that you need to cover them. I'm just going to show it to you here because I can't put this on the induction burner because it's too heavy. It'll break the burner. So just imagine that this water is boiling. All you do is if you don't have one of these nifty little racks, you can use anything to get the canners off or get the jars off the bottom of the pan. So the cans should not make direct contact with the jars. Should not make direct contact with the bottom of your hot water canner or your stock pot, whatever you're using. But you don't have to have a rack like this. This is convenient because you can load it up while the water's boiling and then drop it in. That doesn't have anything in it, so it's floating. But you certainly don't need them. Ball makes a little like plasticky one that maybe is silicone or something. I don't know. That works great. Another thing you could do is just use a pie plate, like an aluminum pie plate, and put on the bottom of your burner, or excuse me, your pan. But if you do the pie plate, you need something a little extra. So what I used to do is just ball up aluminum foil and put it on the bottom of my pan and then put my pie plate on top of it. So you can do whatever you need to do. If your Instant Pot has like a little, I think my Instant Pot came with a little rack that could separate, so like something like this. Again, you just want to have something that's getting the jars off the bottom of the canner. So that's lots of metal. So yeah, so when I do the hot water bath, that's all I'm using. This container needs to have a lid. This is a super cheap pot. It is an enameled pot. I think it's called a lobster pot. It's very big. It'll hold 12 jars. Snug, but it'll hold 12 like half-pint regular mouth jars, which is very convenient, and it's deep enough that it'll actually hold multiple levels of jars if you want to do that too. Again, you just need to put a separator between these jars and the jars you put above it. I probably couldn't do 2 half-pint jars, but I could do like a half-pint and then the 4-ounce jars stacked on top of each other, which I've done before, and that works fine. So yeah, I think that's all I need to tell you about that. But that's what a hot water bath canner is. It's just a vessel to hold boiling water. It's nothing fancy. And then something to keep the jars off the bottom of the rack. That's all you're looking for. So I'm going to put that on the burner on the stove to boil so that I have hot water boiling when I am ready to actually put these in there. So you don't want to have to boil the water after you've already got stuff in cans. You want to go right from hot stuff in the pot to directly into the hot water bath canner. So there's that. So that's what you need if you want to preserve them, but you don't have to. You can certainly just refrigerate them and, distribute them to some 6 friends, and there you go. You're good to go. You don't have to can them if you don't want to. But for the actual process itself, other than what you need for a hot water bath canner, which I just showed you my canner, the only other thing that's super helpful to have if you are going to can is something like this. This is broken. It used to have protective plastic handles, but it is just a jar lifter. It's just a way to lift the jars in and out of the hot water bath. They're very affordable, and again, Ball I think has like a learn to can kit or something that they come in, or you can buy them individually at most grocery stores in the canning or preserving section. So I forgot to add that into the hot water bath section, but that is helpful. The other thing you're going to need is about 3 pounds of jalapenos, a ridiculous amount of sugar, some apple cider vinegar, and some turmeric, celery seed, and granulated garlic. Now this recipe, and I apologize I didn't tell you what recipe I'm using. This recipe is from foodiefamily.com. It's called Candied Jalapenos. But most recipes for jalapenos, candied jalapenos, or cowboy candy are the same. So just use whichever one you prefer. Sorry, I was just checking out my hot water bath. It smelled a little strong. So the first thing you're going to do is cut up 3 pounds of jalapenos, which is a lot of jalapenos, y'all. So wear gloves. Just don't even make your life complicated. Wear gloves. What you're going to do first is cut all of the stems off, and then you need to slice them. So to slice them, I will use a food processor. You can use a mandolin, or you can do it by hand, but let me just say that you should definitely not do it by hand. And you probably shouldn't do it with a mandolin. And the only reason is, unless you have a lot of ventilation, it gets a little intense when you're slicing these guys up. And when you're doing 3 pounds, it's actually quite a bit, as you can imagine. So I really do think the food processor is the way to go. Most food processors have a slicing blade. Again, you don't have to have them, and you don't have to do 3 pounds. You can do whatever quantity works for you. But yeah, just don't break your face. Wear gloves. Somebody asked if you need to wear gloves when you're picking. I don't need to wear gloves when I'm picking. I've never had any trouble, and Tova wears contacts and she's never had any trouble. But certainly at this point, now maybe if you're picking the really hot peppers, that's problematic. Or if you're very sensitive, but we've not had trouble with it thus far. But when you're cutting them and when you're packing them into jars, I would definitely wear gloves, especially if you are a contact wearer, because that will get in your eyes. That happened to my mother once. Before there were easy access to rubber gloves for folks to wear for things like this. She was pickling, I think, or doing something with banana peppers, which are traditionally not a very hot pepper, but they just, every once in a while you get a crop or a season that makes them hotter than normal, or who knows, maybe they were just something that looked like a banana pepper, but were in fact like a Hungarian hot wax or something like that. I don't know. But they were hotter than she anticipated, and when she just have a rogue jalapeno. When she went to put her contacts in, it was not a good scene. So be aware, okay? Now you also want to make sure that you wash all these. You can see mine are pretty shiny. They've already been washed, so they are good to go. Do blemishes or anything on the fruit matter? I don't think so. I would say if you have anything that looks like decay, like if it's slimy or very soft, then yes, that would probably not be kosher at all. And I would not use that one. And for example, like see this area right here? I'm not going to use that because you just no need to risk it. Peppers are pretty plentiful, and you don't want to risk ruining a whole batch of something just to try to save that ½ ounce of jalapeno. But you don't, it's not like apples where when you pick apples, you have to be very vigilant about making sure nothing has a wormhole, because it'll ruin everything. It's not that intense. Just make sure that they're in fairly good nick and you'll be fine. Okay, so now we're on to the next part. We're gonna slice these dudes. Now I still have a Cuisinart that I have had since I graduated from college. Or no, that's not true. But I have had it since before my child was born. But my husband recently got me this, what is it, Breville? That is a immersion blender, food processor, all in one. I secretly don't like it as much, but I feel like I need to use it because it was a gift. You know what I mean? Do you hear me? And one good thing this one does have is it has a special feature that allows you to adjust the depth of the slicing blade. So you can see, okay, here it is on storage. You can see it's flush. And then you can dial it all the way up to have a very thick cut. So I usually put mine about in the middle, because I think it tells you 1/8 to 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit. There we go. And you can measure it if you want to, but you know, hello. So yeah, don't tell my husband I don't really like it as much. But that is a very nice feature. So, I mean, I can't complain too much. The only reason I don't like it is it does not have hands-free operation. You have to, the wand attachment, essentially the motor part of the wand attaches here. And so you use that. So you don't have like an engage button where you just turn on the button and it will cut forever. So it's a little bit more tedious to do these bigger projects. But what I found that works is to, oops, I missed one. I missed a top. Is to load these in there so that they'll mostly stand up straight. And then, because they're usually too big to fit just in the little inserty thing. So just put them in there and then just start cutting them up. And this is a process that is a little bit lengthy, not too bad. Okay, so that was the last of my peppers. Get this out of the way. Sometimes when you overfill the compactor, the food processor, it's hard to disengage the blade. But then you can just do that, it's fine. Okay. So there's all my jalapenos. The great thing is that's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about seeds. All you gotta do is take the tops off and then just process the pants off those things and you're done. Isn't that awesome? So it's actually quite a fast little process. I do have a mandolin, but it's just way more time consuming. And again, you're breathing in so much more of the pepper that can become quite uncomfortable. So I just don't advise it. So that's all of our prep work. Now all we have to do is cook up the sugar solution and get these dudes going. So we'll do that next. Okay, so what we have here is our pan with 2 cups of cider vinegar and 6 cups of white sugar in it. I know that that is obscene, but again, you're not going to be eating all that sugar. A lot of it is left behind in a syrup that you can preserve separately. And again, even when you're eating the jalapenos, the flesh itself just absorbs a small amount of that sugar. Well, I shouldn't say a small amount, but it's not like it's absorbing all of this. You're not eating all of this in one jar. So then the next thing we're going to do is add in our turmeric, celery seed, and garlic powder. And again, the recipe does call for cayenne, but I never use it because for some reason I don't ever have it. And dude, they're hot enough, yo. It's intense. The turmeric, I believe, is just for color, and it does help. Adds a little bit of nice punch to it. The celery seed, again, you could probably get away without it because there's only a 1/2 teaspoon in the whole dang thing. But, you know, there it is. If you've got it, go ahead and use it. And it's a good ingredient to have on hand for pickles in general. And then a teaspoon of garlic powder. Excuse me, 3. Granulated garlic powder, whatever you call it. Okay, so then what we're going to do is just heat that up. Basically, we are going to bring that to a boil, and then we're going to simmer it for 5 minutes, add the pepper slices, cook those for 4 minutes, and then we're going to start canning those up. So here we go. Okay, so now this has been hanging out. We are going to go ahead and add in our jalapenos that we sliced so beautifully. Sorry, side of my bowl. I'm not a professional food camera worker. Isn't that pretty? So the syrup typically will not cover them exactly when you first throw those jalapenos in there, but of course they will cook down as they heat up. They'll soften up and they'll make a little bit more, they'll compact more, and so you'll get syrup to maybe not completely cover them, but more so. So you're going to put these in here, and you're going to go ahead and simmer them for another 4 minutes. And this is when you'll feel the pepper gash, y'all. Again, I've got my windows open today because we are lucky to have a cool enough day in August to do that. But if you're sensitive or have any sort of breathing issues, it could be problematic if you're doing it, especially in a closed environment. So I recommend that if you can, get your windows open, get some air moving through. I don't know if a respirator would help with that. I'm not sure like what the particulate size is or anything like that. So I don't know like if a dust mask or a respirator mask would actually help. So I can't give you advice about that. But I mean, it's not like it's terrible. Obviously I'm talking to you right now, I'm not having any trouble. It's just every once in a while if you put your head right over the pan, or you're just like, every once in a while it just releases more gas than other times. I don't know if it's like air pockets or what happens in the syrup. But, and again, it's not like I've ever been like, I literally can't breathe. But I have been like, a little irritated. Some irritation. And again, I wear glasses, not contacts, so I can't speak to that factor either. Although Tova was in here with me when I was cooking them, and she's a contact wearer. Although now that I say that, I'm not sure she was wearing contacts that day. I can't remember. So I can't speak to that. And you can see already they're even starting to kind of soften down enough that the syrup is coming up higher on them. You'll see a lot of pickled pepper recipes. You just pack the fresh vegetable, the fresh pepper, directly into the jar, and then just pour a boiling brine or a boiling syrup on top of it. But the problem with that is it's sometimes it's hard to get them compacted into that jar. I found, especially when we were doing, well, not especially, but I found when we were doing those Hungarian hot waxes to pickle those, they were difficult. They were so crunchy and fresh. It was hard to get them packed into the jar that I felt enough were in there. Because again, if you have too little pepper in the jar, so like if there's a lot of airspace in the jar, you're going to use a lot more brine or sugar syrup or what have you to cover them, and so you can run out. Now this recipe, you're definitely, just no worry at all. But in some pickling recipes, it is problematic. So you do need to make sure that you're really packing those vegetables into the jar, especially if it's not a recipe where they're cooked in the syrup or the brine at all. When I did my pickled peppers, I actually just put them in the boiling brine for a few moments to help soften them so that they would be, in fact, easier to pack into the jars. It wasn't for any sort of sterilization or germ issue. It was just the convenience of being able to get them into the jars in a softened state versus that crunchy, non-flexible, fresh state. So, yeah, you can see there's already change, right? We're getting good color variation. I'll talk a little bit right now while we're doing this, because why not? About sugar versus acid in preservation, or in canning specifically. And I have probably misspoken on several occasions. It was pointed out to me after my last podcast that sugar is not what is maintaining the safety of the item. that sugar is a preservative. Now, when I hear the word preservative, I automatically twine that into safety in my mind. But in reality, the acidity of the product, so fruits are very acidic, this has a vinegar component to the brine, but the acidity is what is your safety in the preservation of the item. The sugar is what's preserving texture, color, and flavor in many cases. So I thought that was, and that makes perfect sense. And I've been told that before, but again, my mind automatically tied the word preserve into safety. Like preserving was a factor of safety versus preserving is actually two things that are happening. You're preserving the safety of the food. You're preserving you're maintaining a germ-free environment for it to sit in a shelf, but you're also preserving the color, texture, and flavor of the food. So for example, 2 years ago, we did like 20 pounds of strawberry preserves. Actually, been more than that because we did 20 pounds of strawberries. Oof. So that was in 2016. I can't remember if it was in 2016 or 2017, actually. I think it may have been 2017. I found a box of those preserves that I did not realize we had. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I found some. And I had used a low sugar method of preserving those. And what happened is the jam itself is fine. It is in no way, doesn't have any mold issues. There's no bubbling. There's nothing that indicates that it's not a safe food product. But especially where the fruit that was not, that was a little bit less mashed, as you know, rises to the top typically, that fruit has kind of grayed in color. Now it's not strictly gray, but has definitely not preserved its color as well. And that's because it was a lower sugar preserve. So again, it's difficult to separate those things, I think, in my mind at least. But that is the case, that the acidity is what's causing safety, and then the sugar is what's maintaining color, texture, and flavor. And I actually don't know how that works, so I apologize. I'm not a food scientist. But I think part of my confusion comes from honey. And because honey is such a sweet thing, I equate it in many ways with sugar. And honey is its own beast, where it is not only a preservative in terms of like the color, texture, flavor, but it is itself antimicrobial. And so I guess I kind of got those tacked into my head together. And also, if I'm not mistaken, sugar is itself a slightly acidic food. And I could be wrong about that, but maybe that was just like crazy chiropractor talk. Because, you know, people love to talk about alkalinity and acidity of your body and how that affects your long-term health. It's one of the newer, I guess it's not new. It was new to me. But one of the things is that sugar creates a more acidic environment. So that maybe also does play a factor in the safety. But again, the acidity of the brine, the vinegar, is what is the safe aspect of it. And yeah, you can see I have quite a bit of cooked downedness. My brine is definitely, or my sugar solution is definitely easily covering those vegetables. And I have a good amount of wiggle room in there. Okay, so here we go. We have been simmering those for the time allotted. And now what I'm gonna actually do is move us, zoink, so that we get a little bit of both. I think that'll work well. What you're gonna be doing is taking your peppers out of the pot, putting them in your canning jars. At the same time, you're gonna be reducing this syrup a little bit more. So if you want to, you can bring your heat up as much as you can. I don't wait to take all the peppers out and then try to turn the heat up, because that just seems kind of silly. But so what we're gonna do is just put these in our jars. Of course, follow basic canning safety in terms of sterilizing your jars. To be honest with you, I never officially sterilize them. I pop them into the hot water bath, boiling bath for a few minutes, which I guess is technically sterilizing them. Or I just wash them in really hot soapy water, especially if they've been used before. So what you're gonna do is just pack those peppers in there. You're using a slotted spoon because you don't wanna get too much liquid in, because you wanna get as much pepper in as you possibly can. And you wanna have about a 1/4 inch headspace when you're all said and done. You do not need one of these clever little funnel things, but boy, I love them. If nothing else, they keep the rims of your jars clean. And in this kind of product where it's very sticky, very syrupy, that is such a nice handy thing. So again, you do not in any way need that, but it is helpful. And we're just gonna do that. We're gonna can them all up, get them all in there. You can use any size jar you like. I actually prefer to use the 4-ounce jars for these guys. Just because, you know, as you can imagine, you're not using large quantities of these at any given time, or at least I'm not. So I've never had them go bad in the refrigerator, but I don't know how long they're good in the refrigerator really. So I prefer the 4-ounce jars, but quite frankly, I was out of them. So that's why we're not getting them, using them. You may also notice, I don't know how well the resolution is going to roll, or like what your resolution is that you're viewing on. You may notice that the peppers look a little shrivelly, like a little bit pruny, for lack of a better word. They will plump out as they sit on your shelf, as that sugar syrup absorbs into them more. They will plump out more. Whew, get a little too much in there, just put them in the next guy. So yes, if you're seeing that and wondering about that, that is the reason. This recipe should give us anywhere from 4 to 6 half pints. So this is the 4th one I have, but I did use more peppers. I just made sure that I had at least 3 pounds, but there may have been up to 3.5 pounds in that batch. But I think we're still gonna get 6. Again, just make sure you're packing them in there, because the less you pack it, again, you'll have plenty of syrup for this recipe, but you'll just have to use more jars, which is more work. Yep, it looks like we're gonna get 6 out of it. I would suggest, if you've never hot water canned anything before, that you always have the maximum number of cans ready to go. If you don't, that's okay. Just don't, if you like run into a situation where you have more veg than you have jars, that's totally cool. Just refrigerate that last portion. So rather than trying to like hustle and sterilize or clean out a jar, get it dry, and while everything is boiling and this stuff is all cooling down, and just make yourself less stressed out and just say, okay, that's gonna be one that I don't preserve. I'm just gonna put that one in the fridge. So now what we're gonna do is just boil this syrup down quite a bit more. The recipe suggests, I think, 5 minutes at a full boil. And of course, the more open your container is, the better evaporation you'll have. And it's not really a super scientific, because again, we're just trying to reduce it to get the sugar in a good concentration. But it's, to be honest with you, I've canned a few just like this because I've just forgotten what I was doing. Me? No, surely not. But and see, like this one, this is going to be a 5.5 or 5.5 jars, because this one is only half full, so I won't try to can that one. I'll just pop it in the refrigerator. I'll put a little syrup on it, but I'll just put that guy in the refrigerator. It would have been a perfect 4-ounce jar, but alas. So we're gonna let that boil, and then we're gonna pour the boiling syrup, ladle the boiling syrup onto these jars, and then we'll be ready to start with the rest of the canning process. Okay, so this has been going for 5 minutes, and now what we're going to do is simply ladle in this syrup to cover up our jalapenos. So again, you want to leave about a 1/4 inch headspace. It does not take much syrup. That one is already done. Like, I mean, it was just like a few bits. Oh, one of the other things I meant to say, or I should say mention now, is since we did pack those peppers in, you might notice at the end of this 5 minutes that your peppers have risen up a little bit. You can just take a couple off the top so that, again, you have that 1/4 inch headspace, because you don't want them to be like literally compressed. You just want to not have airspace in between, as much airspace as in between the peppers, but you don't want to actually like crush them. So if they rebound a bit, then go ahead and take a few off the top. So again, you've got that good headspace, and you'll notice that you vary the amount of syrup you need for each jar quite a bit, and that's just, again, how much airspace is in between those peppers, how tightly they're packed, how well they happen to fit in there that moment, and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's all you gotta do. You'll want to go ahead and go back and wipe off jar rims. If you used a funnel, it will help quite a bit. If you don't use a funnel, it's a bit of a pain in the neck. It's not really, I shouldn't say that. It's just slightly more inconvenient if you haven't used a funnel. But you'll see, even if you have, you'll drip a little bit here and there. But you'll just want to use a moistened rag to wipe off those. I guess technically you're supposed to use maybe something that's like a paper towel that's disposable. Maybe, I don't know. But just use a clean dishcloth and you're fine. And the reason you want those to be wiped off and clean is because if there's debris on that rib, if there's debris on the rim, it can affect your seal. So you want to make sure, especially with things like this where it's a syrup where you may not see that there's debris on the rim, you want to make sure, and especially if you're wearing gloves like I am, you can't easily tell. It's something to be aware of. So yeah, then you just take your lids that have been washed. You don't want to boil your lids because that'll mess up your seal stuff. But you just put those on. Whoop. And then you're going to put on your rims just finger tight. So again, these are just all general hot water bath rules that you can find in your big ball blue book of canning or whatever you choose from the library. So yeah, you don't want to tighten this down really tight because you want to be able to let air escape. But you do want them to be at least holding the lid flush so that seal can be made. So yeah, I'm just going to put these guys in the hot water bath, process them for 10 minutes, and then they'll come out and they'll be ready to go. So just a reminder, you can use this syrup for lots of other things. Suggestions have been to use it on pork products especially, because again, usually the sweet and the pork is a good combo. But certainly you could use it as a sweet component in lots of sauces. Even sometimes enchilada sauces will have a bit of sweetener in them, so you could certainly use it as a complement or a substitution for that sugar component. Or you could use it as the sugar in a marinade. Certainly could, and it has the acidity as well to help it penetrate whatever you're marinating. But I don't have good first-hand experience of any of those things because I have not been adventurous yet and done those. Somebody did ask if it was hot pepper jelly. I don't believe so. I've never actually made hot pepper jelly, or I have eaten it, but it's like a jelly consistency. And this is definitely a syrup. Even when it cools, it is a syrup consistency. So I imagine if you added pectin, you would get something similar to a hot pepper jelly. But I don't know because I'm not well versed in that at all. But I would imagine it would totally work. But yeah, so there you go. And then we'll get those out of the canner in just a few minutes. Okay, so there are the cans out of the hot water bath. You probably already heard a few pings. You don't want to try to press the nipple, for lack of a better word. Just like a jar from the grocery has like a safety bubble that'll tell you if it's been opened before. That's what's happening here as well. And those little pings mean that that safety bubble is being depressed. So you don't want to press on them while they are cooling. They should just do it by themselves. But you do not need to let them cool. Lots of times they'll ping off right away, but sometimes it takes some of them a little bit longer. But that's okay. Just let them hang out and do their thing. So here is a finished product, you know, whatever. This is one that I canned a couple weeks ago. We have already started using them, so they are good. But I wanted to show you that there's no ring on this jar. Somebody pointed out on the last podcast that I showed them without the rings, and I should mention that while you can leave the rings on while they're cooling, and in fact you should. There's no sense in trying to take them off. But do not store them with the rings on. What can happen is that the rings can artificially hold the lid down and prevent you from realizing that there's spoilage. It can also rust and cause damage to the lid here, and then make problems for you along the road. So do store them without the rings on. But yeah, so there you go. There's candied jalapenos. Enjoy.